Welcome to the Shower Epiphanies podcast, where we explore your hidden thoughts and desires, revealing your greatest drop the mic moments. Now, here's your host, Art Costello.
Welcome to the Shower Epiphanies podcast. Today, Adam Mendler is our guest. Adam, I don't even know how to begin to explain him. He has really done a great deal of things in his life, from being the chief executive officer at the Veloz Group. He's the host of the podcast 30-Minute Mentors. He's graduated from USC. He's done many, many things. And I'm going to let Adam tell his story. So, Adam, welcome to the show. And can you tell us your story?
Wow, thank you so much for having me. And I really appreciate that. Thanks for the shout out to USC. It's been a rough couple of years for us as a university. And I'm wearing my USC t-shirt today. I know that this podcast is an audio only podcast, so you don't get to see my USC Dornsife t-shirt. I had a great 4 years there, and I'm still pretty involved as an alum. I'm actually the chair emeritus of the USC Alumni Entrepreneurs Network. So fight on, any Trojan listeners out there.
Awesome.
I know we were chatting a little bit off air about your background, and Art, I'm obviously always happy to have the opportunity to converse with a fellow baseball fan and so we'll call you an honorary Southern Californian. So pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Adam. It's an honor to have you. How did your journey start?
So I'm an LA native, was born and raised in Tarzana, California, which for listeners who are not aware is a suburb of Los Angeles. And was really a great childhood growing up in Tarzana. Really had amazing formative years. And as mentioned, did my undergrad at USC. Upon graduating, moved to New York, worked on Wall Street for a couple of years. It was a little bit different than the Charlie Sheen movie, but I spent a couple of years working for a company called D.E. Shaw. At the time, they were the largest hedge fund in the world. And it was definitely an interesting experience. Did my time, came back to LA, and got my MBA across town at UCLA, which was also a great experience for me. While I was getting my MBA, I worked for William Morris Endeavor, the talent agency, and for Universal Pictures, the big studio, and went back into the financial services industry, working for Credit Suisse, a big Swiss bank. And I had all these big company experiences. I was 28 years old and felt like it's the right time in my life to try to do something a little bit different. It's the right time in my life to take that entrepreneurial leap. If I was ever going to start my own business, there was never going to be a better time for me to do it. My energy was never going to be higher. My expenses were never going to be lower. This was the right time. So I did it. I joined forces with my brother, who's 2 years younger than me. He was working as a software developer. And we took every idea that we had and we started a business. We called it the Veloz Group. We named it after the street we grew up on in Tarzana, Veloz Avenue. And our first year and a half running the Veloz Group was such a fun experience. We had an amazing time creatively, literally pushing on every idea under the sun. But it was a terrible time in terms of actually making money and building businesses because we had no idea what we were doing. We burned through all of our savings after a year and a half and sort of had this moment where we realized if we were going to stay in business, we had to really focus and pick our ideas that were closest to monetization, which we did. We picked our two businesses that were just kind of closest to getting off the ground, one being an office furniture company, the other being a cigar company. And those were the two businesses that we wound up building that we still run to this day. They're national businesses. One's called Beverly Hills Chairs. The other is called Custom Tobacco. We've since started a third business, a software consulting company. Over the years, I've, in addition to my entrepreneurial ventures, have done a lot of writing and speaking on entrepreneurship, on leadership. I've written a lot in Forbes and Inc., in Huffington Post. I started an interview series where I've interviewed hundreds of America's top leaders, and that led me to my podcast, Art, which you so generously mentioned, called 30-Minute Mentors, where I go one-on-one each week with one of America's most successful people CEOs and founders of some of the most successful companies in America, household name companies, celebrities, athletes, generals, admirals, on how they got to the top and on how listeners can as well in 30-minute increments. So I keep busy. I wear a lot of hats. I am probably going to be wearing an angel hat soon now that I can't get a haircut during coronavirus. And if I'm going to be wearing a hat, it's going to be an angel hat because, as we spoke about off air, I miss baseball greatly, but still staying connected to my Los Angeles Angels.
Well, baseball is something that connects people in many, many ways. So that's a good thing. And I'm glad that we're connected through baseball, but I'm glad we're connected through the podcast. What really intrigues me with people that have so vast of experience in entrepreneurship and leadership is, what was the event that got you to move and to recognize that you needed to focus on two businesses instead of all the things you were? Was there a major event in your life that caused that to happen?
The major event was called burning through all of our money. We didn't really have much of a choice.
If something will do it, that's it.
I wish that there was some sort of, wisdom or, I had a dream or some epiphany. No, it was really just basic math. I didn't want to get a job. My brother didn't want to get a job. We knew that if we were going to continue to go down the path we were on, we weren't going to be in business for much longer, because as fun as it was for us to spend our time pushing on all of these new and exciting and interesting ideas, at the end of the day, business is about making money. Business is about profitability, especially when you're running self-funded bootstrap businesses. If you're in businesses that are, VC backed, you're following different metrics, are kind of taking a step back. Something that is a really important topic that I talk about, that I know you talk and think a lot about, is, what is your definition of success? What is your definition of success in business? What is your definition of success in life? Well, in this case, as a bootstrap startup company, our definition of success in that very moment was staying in business, was keeping the lights on, was ensuring that we could continue on this entrepreneurial journey. And when we came to the realization that in order to do that, we had to really focus and drill down on our ideas that were closest to monetization, we did just that.
The need to have closure in any given situation is sheer human nature. And when it comes to romantic relationships, this desire skyrockets. Has your previously failed relationship left you in immense pain? It's not uncommon for people to shy away from a new relationship after their first one fails miserably. The fear of the unknown makes them hide in a shell to prevent any future heartbreak. Relatable? Despite wanting to love and be loved, you can't take the plunge if your mind and heart are still locked somewhere in the past. Maybe you aren't aware of the power of releasing the past, or perhaps you don't know how to do it. Art Costello in his online course teaches the art of moving on from bad places to happier, more stable ones. This course can change your life for good, helping you beat all kinds of negativity on the road to eternal bliss. Sign up now before the gloominess gets the better of you at expectationacademy.com.
I think when our backs are against the wall and we really start to focus, I think the key is focusing on what is really necessary to do to get to the point where we can pay the bills for that week, that month. I mean, I started a business in 1975, and I'll tell you the story in a little bit, because an engineer at USC made all the difference in my life. I think when we get to that point, what happened for me when I went from working for somebody else to my own business, my wife or the lady that I wanted to marry, the woman I wanted to marry, told me, if you're going to be in the entertainment business, I'm not going to marry you. And I had to stop and say, what is more important to me, for the successes I was having in the entertainment business, or was my marriage to my proposal or proposition to get married to this woman more important. And I chose the woman. And people in Hollywood that I knew said to me, "You're crazy, man. Walking away from what you're walking away from for a woman, she could leave you next week. She could leave you next month." And I just said, "Your chance you just take, but I'm willing to take it." When I did that, I had to figure out what I was going to do because I had not a clue. And what I did is I went to work for a friend of mine whose dad owned a roofing company. And I started roofing in commercial buildings around Los Angeles. And it's tough work. It's work that you don't want to really be doing. And I hated it. Coming from a cushy job in the entertainment industry to working up on roofs, commercial roofs is not fun. And we were sweeping gravel one day, and I said to one of the guys, "There's got to be a better way to remove gravel off of a roof than sweeping it with a broom." And they told me this. "We know a guy in Denver that's got a machine." And I said, "Really?" So I started researching, and I found this guy in Denver that built machines that vacuumed the rock off of the roofs. And I went and bought one. And that's how I got into my business, a roof vacuuming business.
Wow.
That started my construction career. And I ended up doing it for 38 years, and it really paid me well. It raised my children, great life. I had houses and cars and boats and vacation places and all that. But when I was doing it, I realized that I needed to have some experience in vacuum technology. And I was at USC doing one of the engineering buildings, and an elderly guy came out and he said to me, "What in the world are you doing?" I said, "We're vacuuming the rock off of the roofs." And he said, "Really?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "That's ingenious." He said, "Do you know what my specialty is? It's in vacuum technology."
Wow.
So he said, "If you want, I will meet with you one day and I will tell you how to make this machine bigger, better, and everything." If it wasn't for him, I would have never had the knowledge to make that machine bigger and better, which set the standard for the industry. And to this day, it's a huge machine that's still being built around the country.
Art, that's awesome. And it really just goes to show the importance of open-mindedness, flexibility. I think that anyone and everyone who's listening to this podcast hopefully can understand you never know where life is going to take you. But if you can take advantage of each and every relationship that you cultivate, and Art, I think that you are a beautiful example of what happens when you approach relationships with an open mind. You approach people with an open mind. You never know where a relationship will take you. And in your case, it took you on a journey that set the course of an extremely successful career. And thank you for sharing that story with me.
Yeah, it actually brought me to where I'm at today because I did it for 38 years. And when my wife got ovarian cancer and passed away, I was able to sell that business and pay off $2.9 million in medical bills.
Wow.
And I had to start all over again. And it led me to the journey I'm on today.
Wow.
I mean, my degrees are all in psychology and everything. And I've always kept myself educated with different psychological concepts and that. But getting back to my open-mindedness.
Art, I feel like I should switch from my current Herman Miller chair, which is one of the chairs we sell through Beverly Hills Chairs, to a couch. Now that I know that you have a psychology background, I could just lay out, and especially if I don't have to pay for an hour of your time. And maybe I should start asking you questions, and we can role reverse over here.
We should be sharing questions or anything, because when you share questions, you get answers. But one of the things I was leaning to is, one of the things about me is that I believe in the possibility of everything, and then everything becomes possible.
It's a great line. I love it.
It's just the way I am. So let's get back to you. This wasn't meant to go on about me, but you've done many, many, many things. Can you kind of go over some of the things that you're involved in? I mean, it's really extensive. You've graduated Phi Beta Kappa from USC, and you got MBA from Anderson School of Management, which my late wife's brother-in-law was the dean at Howard Smith. Dr. Howard
great.
Smith. I don't know if
he
you
was
know
before
him,
my time. But
and he played basketball at USC in the late 60s. So he knew John Wooden and
awesome.
that group. But you've done many, many things. And you've got to have a great deal of stamina and passion for what you do. Where did that come from? Was that something your parents taught you, or is it self-taught?
Art, that's a phenomenal question. And I think that there are two ways of looking at it. Number one is, I believe that in life, there are passionate people. You meet people, I meet people, we all meet people who are highly passionate people. They're passionate about whatever it is that they get involved in, whether it's their work, whether it's their hobbies, whether it's the people who they surround themselves with. I personally think of myself as a passionate person. We were talking about baseball. I'm passionate about baseball. I'm passionate about the Angels. We could do this podcast just on baseball, just on the Angels, just on the Angels managers, just on the Angels second baseman. We could do an entire podcast just talking about David Fletcher. So I'm highly passionate. I'm a highly passionate person. With that said, I also think that it's a lot easier when you spend your time directed and channeled toward endeavors that align with your interests and that align with what really get you going. And I know that it's a topic of great debate. Should I follow a career that aligns with my passion, or should I follow a career and I will just sort of, become passionate at it? And I fall in the camp of follow your passion, pursue your passion, chase your dreams. As I mentioned to your listeners in the beginning of the show, I'm based in Los Angeles. Los Angeles is a city of dreamers. You turn to your left, you have an aspiring actor or an aspiring actress. You turn to your right, you have an aspiring artist. You have an aspiring musician. You look up, you've got an aspiring screenwriter. So everyone here is aspiring to do something and to do something big. And with those aspirations come a lot of people who tell you no, who tell you, don't do that, don't follow that path. Perhaps that path has a little bit too much resistance. Why don't you do something a little bit different? Why don't you take that 9-to-5 job? Why don't you take that corporate, more traditional path? And you know what? That might be the right path for many people. But if that's not the right path for you, you only have one life to live, and it's your life. I, got great advice from, of all people, my mom about a year ago when she told me, Adam, it's your life. Live your life. Don't try to live your life for someone else. Don't try to make other people happy. Live your life for you. And I think too often we fall into this trap of trying to please other people and trying to, I think it's extremely important to seek out the counsel and wisdom and advice of others. But at the same time, I think it's extremely important to trust your gut, to trust your heart, and to follow what you know is right. And if you do that and you're a passionate person, you're going to live a very passionate life. So, Art, to answer your question, it's very easy to spend your life and spend your time doing things that you can get really, really engaged in when you're doing things that you're passionate about.
Has anyone ever inspired you to discover a happier, healthier, and more fulfilled you? It is a magical experience, isn't it? Inspiration is indeed very powerful, yet it's often undermined. It can lift you from the ground to the sky in no time. Have you ever thought about returning the favor by inspiring the people around you? If you don't think you have it in you, we have good news for you. Art Costello's online course has everything you need to learn to supercharge yourself and shape your character into a powerful personality. Get ready to discover your strengths and unleash the creativity within. To Don't believe it? Check it out yourself by signing up for this life-changing course at expectationacademy.com. That's expectationacademy.com.
Yeah, I'm one of these fortunate people. When I do something, I really get passionate about it. I've always said if I was going to be a car washer or a trash guy, that I would do it with more passion than anyone else, because I just get very passionate about everything that I do. So, I think that the best advice your mother gave you is, and I put it in this form with people, is live to your core expectations, not to the expectations of other people.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Because you'll find true happiness when you live to your core expectations. Just off the top of your head, I'm going to ask you a question. Can you identify your 3 core expectations?
My 3 core expectations of myself. Can you clarify the question? I want to make sure that I answer it
of yourself.
To my abilities.
I always deal with self-expectation, because I think it's the most powerful tool we have in our tool chest to figure out society, to figure out our own personal space. When I was 9 years old, I had to figure out life on my own, and it really taught me a great deal because I couldn't rely on anyone else. And it took me a lot of years to figure this out, and I didn't do it till after my wife passed away. But my core expectations have always been love, integrity, and communication. Those are my 3 core expectations.
Yeah, those are great.
And that's what I live by. And no one can blow me off of them. You could take dynamite, and I live to those expectations. And when you do that, I believe you find true happiness. I can't tell you how happy a life I've lived. And being 72 years old, going to be 73, I've lived a lot of life, and I've had a lot of heartache, and I've had a lot of victories, and I've had a lot of tragedy and defeat and all that. But the thing that's always kept me going is that in the end, I know everything's all right and everything's a learning experience.
Sure.
And that is what I'm all about, So I now teach people the principles that I believe created this beautiful life that I've lived. I've done everything I've ever wanted to do. I was a Marine in Vietnam. I wanted that structure. When I was younger, I didn't have any structure in my life. So that structure I got out of the Marine Corps was vital for me to be successful in the rest of my life, because it taught me the discipline and structure I needed to get through. But everything is always, I care deeply about people. I always have, and I always will. So
yeah,
I'm just lucky.
Very evident just in our connection. I think it's very clear that you're a very compassionate person. It's hard not to be able to observe that about you. I mean, to answer your question, I really try to live by, one North Star, which is, at the end of the day, are the decisions you're making decisions made out of best intentions or not? I try to make every decision out of a place of goodness. And not every decision I make is going to be right. I make plenty of bad decisions. I think we all make bad decisions. We make bad decisions every day. I think that as a leader, it's important to try to make as few bad decisions as possible, and to try to make the bad decisions be on issues that are not particularly impactful. And when you do make a bad decision, to try to recover from it as quickly as possible rather than compounding it. When you make a bad decision, to acknowledge it, to own up to it. But with all that said, if you make decisions out of a place of goodness, even if you make a bad decision, I think that you're going to be in a better place than if you make decisions out of self-interest. Now, that isn't to say that you never make decisions out of self-interest. Obviously, we all care about ourselves. There's the line that I learned in Jewish school. I don't know how many years ago I learned it, but I've certainly relearned it over the years as a leader. If I'm not for myself, who will be? If I'm only for myself, who am I? And I think that all leaders really adopt that framework. All leaders should really adopt that mindset. Certainly the mindset that I have.
I agree. I mean, there just comes a point in our life when we just have to accept the things that the decisions we've made, we have to make them in faith that everything is going to work out the way that it's supposed to be. And when you come from that basis of goodness, making decisions in goodness, I don't see how you can make a bad decision. It's just maybe less educated. And I often say there is no such thing as a bad decision. The only bad decision is to make no decision at all, because that's more costly a lot than making a less educated decision. Does that make sense?
When I was a kid, I used to love listening to sports talk radio. And I feel like sports talk radio is a genre that sort of died out over the years. But when I was a kid, I loved listening to it. And one of my favorite sports talk radio show hosts was a guy named Dave Smith. And Dave Smith, it was a really colorful guy. Do you remember Dave Smith? Because I see you laughing.
I do remember Dave Smith.
You remember Dave Smith?
I do.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Dave Smith had this great line, and Dave Smith would say, "Better to have an opinion and be wrong than not to have an opinion at all." And I don't know that that's true as a leader. I don't know that that's true as a CEO, but it's definitely true as a talk radio host. So I think that you kind of need to know what your job is. And as a talk radio host, better to have an opinion and be wrong than not to have an opinion at all. And that's why Dave Smith was such a great radio host. But as a leader, Art, you're 100% right. We need to make decisions. If we make the wrong decision, as long as it's well thought out, well educated decision that came from a place of goodness, we can recover from it.
Yeah, absolutely. But you were talking a little bit about leadership, and I want to talk about that, because what do you think are some of the necessary qualities that a good leader has?
Great question, Art. I think that a leader has to have a number of key characteristics. Leaders have to be able to, number one, be in touch with themselves. And I think that's a perfect theme of the show. So before you are able to lead others, you need to be able to lead your own life. So we always think about sort of the external characteristics, the external traits of an effective leader. But I think first and foremost, leaders need to be fully in tune, fully in touch with their own strengths and their own weaknesses. Leaders who are comfortable in their own skin are capable of succeeding on the leadership journey. Leaders need to care about other people. At the end of the day, leadership is not about individual success, it's about collective success. Leadership is about bringing each and every person, not only in your organization, but impacted by your organization, to that next level. So leaders need to be able to inspire. Leaders need to be able to motivate. Leaders need to be able to empower. And leaders need to be able to get out of the way. Great leaders know what they're capable of doing and what they're not capable of doing. They know that they're not the smartest people in the room. They know that if they're the smartest person in the room, they're in the wrong room. And they're capable of recruiting and attracting people who are greater than them, into their organizations and empowering them. Those are a few things. I mean, we can kind of go on and on. Mm-hmm. Great leaders have great vision. And, Art, how much time do we have? I mean, my understanding is this is
Well, let me ask you this question. Who are some of the great leaders that you like to look up to?
Yeah, I get asked that question often. And there are leaders who I admire, who I know. And then there are leaders who I admire, who I don't know. So, you and I were talking a little bit earlier off air, and then we were talking on air about baseball. And I think that when you look at sports, that's always a very relatable area to talk to listeners about leadership. And when I look at leaders who I admire in sports, I look at leaders who are capable of doing all the things that I just spoke about, who are capable of inspiring, motivating, getting the best out of the people around them. In basketball, a leader who I really admire is Brad Stevens. I think that Brad Stevens embodies the modern leader. He doesn't yell and scream at his players, but he brings his players and his team to their next level. He gets each player to become their best self by teaching them and positioning themselves rather than by motivating through fear and intimidation. In baseball, I'm partial. I'm a big Angels fan, as we spoke about, but Joe Madden is as good a leader as there is. I've actually interviewed on my podcast, the episode is going to air in a couple of weeks, the play-by-play announcer for the Angels, Victor Rojas. And Victor and I spoke on air about his experiences with Joe Madden. He played for Joe Madden, and he's now colleagues with Joe Madden. And from afar, I've always admired Joe Madden. He knows Joe Madden really well. And among the things we talked about was really Joe Madden's ability to connect with every single person in the clubhouse. Doesn't matter if you're the star player or the 25th guy on the roster. Doesn't matter if you have a $100 million contract or if you're riding the AAA Major League shuttle. He is someone who makes you feel comfortable, who makes you feel like you belong, who makes you feel like one of the guys. And we can kind of go on, but I sort of look at,
I look back on my life and I think about the people that have influenced on me, and there's been many of the biggest leaders in my life. I think you probably interviewed maybe some of them. I'm just trying to go through my head. John Maxwell. John Maxwell's author of 21 Refutable Laws of Leadership. I've just had so many great people, but I think the greatest leader to me was my actually platoon sergeant in Vietnam. Just had a great deal of courage, did not yell and scream at us. But the thing that you talked about is connection, and he connected with his men, and he knew that we had to have each other's back to survive. And I think I just learned a lot from him during that, 16 months that we were together.
I was kind of mentioning some leaders who I don't know personally. I've never met Brad Stevens. I've never met Joe Madden. I wish I was good enough to play for Joe Madden, but my baseball career topped out as a really, really mediocre high school infielder. So that never happened. But I have had the fortune of connecting with some of the greatest leaders in the world, some of the greatest military leaders in the world. I've had a few on my podcast. I've had many in my interview series. And the first military leader who I had on my podcast was Admiral Jim Stavridis, who was a 4-star admiral, was the Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. And Admiral Stavridis really embodies what I believe every leader should be. Admiral Stavridis is a leader who does not lead by yelling and screaming. He's a leader who leads by explaining, who leads by convincing, who leads by compelling. The next interview, actually, Art, I'm not sure when our show is going to air, but a week from the day that we're recording, I'm going to be airing an interview that I recorded with a retired 3-star general, Reynold Hoover. Lieutenant General Reynold Hoover was a 3-star general in the United States Army, another phenomenal leader. And we aired a 30-minute conversation. And I think that listeners who are not familiar with what generals and admirals are like, I did another interview that's going to be coming up in June with General Tom Trask, a 3-star general, retired general from the Air Force. I think that those who are not familiar with what really, really high-level leaders in our armed services are like, I encourage them to listen in, because, we sort of have this picture that Hollywood has created of, Jack Nicholson and A Few Good Men. And actually, Admiral Stavridis, when I first interviewed him, we did an interview in a different interview series that I had. And I asked him, Admiral Stavridis, what is the biggest misconception that people have about the military and military leaders? And he said, everyone thinks that we're like Jack Nicholson from A Few Good Men. It couldn't be further from the truth. And in my own personal experience in getting to know some tremendous military leaders, that's the best way of putting it. Because, General Tom Trask, he told me when I interviewed him, he said, he never raised his voice. That wasn't how he worked. He never raised his voice when communicating with his troops. I did another interview with a retired admiral who told me he could count on his hand the number of times in his entire military career that someone told him, this is an order. Do this. This is an order. On one hand. So one of the things to me that has really stood out from interviewing the most successful leaders in the country is the core principles of leadership are applicable no matter where you lead. If you lead in the military, if you lead a Fortune 500 company, if you lead a small startup company, if you lead a baseball team, you need to understand what it takes to be a great leader, and you need to apply it. And listening to a retired 4-star admiral or 3-star general or Fortune 500 CEO, I did an interview with the former CEO of Campbell Soup, and all these great leaders really convey very similar principles about what it takes to lead effectively.
Don't know which direction you want your life to take? Are you sinking deep down into the pit of uncertainties day by day? So, what's the secret to leading a happy, satisfied life? It's taking matters into your own hands. But what if the matters in question are a total blur? Art Costello's Expectation Academy course aims to tell you exactly how you can get some clarity in your life. This course can be your savior on your journey to reinventing yourself. While you certainly can't plan your whole future ahead, you can definitely control twists and turns your life takes. So what are you waiting for? Sign up for this course now at expectationacademy.com. Get a chance to broaden your horizons and add meaning to your life. That's expectationacademy.com.
I think that you really bring up a great point about that great leaders are great leaders no matter what field they come from. And, one of the old questions that you always hear are great leaders born or are they developed? And I've always been of the idea that great leadership is developed. It's a skill that we develop. And it starts with being faithful to who we are, to knowing who we are, to creating this person who draws in and is able to take care of people, to interact with people to the point where they will follow you anywhere, and that's only done by experience.
Art, I agree with you completely. I couldn't agree with you more. I think very well said.
It's one of we don't want to go into the problems that we're having in this country right now politically, but, leadership always starts at the top and stops at the top. Leadership is leadership, and it's got to be solid. It's got to be consistent. It's got to be faithful. There's a whole lot of qualities in leadership that we've talked about.
Absolutely. And if anyone wants to talk politics with me, I'm always happy to talk politics off air. I try to, keep that a little bit isolated from my appearances because, it's obviously a very hot button issue. Although I do have very strong views in terms of my own political beliefs. And people can probably guess where I fall on the political spectrum. But with that said, regardless of whether you're a Democrat or a Republican or an independent, there's no question that leadership starts at the top. And at the end of the day, who came up with the line, the buck stops here? It was the ultimate leader, the President of the United States, because the buck stops at the top. And this is a perfect example of it, what's happening right now with the coronavirus crisis.
We were talking about politics and stuff, and I'm pretty independent when it comes to politics because I realize that all politicians are trying to influence you, and I want to make my own decisions. They're supposed to follow our lead, and I guess I'm very idealistic about it. But the constituency is who really is supposed to be who our politicians represent. What has happened is money has gotten so big and huge in politics that it's such a controlling factor, but that's a time for another podcast.
Yeah, I don't know if you got a chance to read the article in the New Yorker this morning. Now everyone's going to know what my political views are, but yes, I read the New Yorker. Yes, I did read the article this morning on Mitch McConnell. I don't know if you got a chance to read it, but if you didn't, I highly recommend it. Very, very. Yeah, it was on Mitch McConnell and his history and money and politics, and highly recommend it.
Yeah, I will do that. Well, we're getting near the end of our show, and I wanted to give you the opportunity to tell the audience where they can get a hold of you, how they can get a hold of you, and anything you've got coming up in the next few months that they can connect with you on.
Art, thank you for that. Firstly, this was an absolute pleasure. Really enjoyed being with you. Really enjoyed the opportunity to speak to you and to speak to your audience and to just take the time here and have a very meaningful conversation. So thank you for this time and this platform.
We're honored to have you.
I try to make it really easy for people to find me. Just my name, Adam Mendler. So you can find me at adammendler.com. You can connect with me on social media, on Instagram, at Adam Mendler, on Twitter, at Adam Mendler. I hope anyone who's interested in podcasts, which you might be if you're listening to this one, to check out my podcast called 30-Minute Mentors. It's all spelled out, 30-Minute Mentors. You can find it at 30minutementors.com or on your favorite podcasting app, iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher. And, I really, as we spoke about earlier, Art, talking about passion, I've really poured my heart and soul into these interviews. I continue to. I work really hard at bringing on the best people I can find, people who I think have the best perspectives on how to get to the top and on how listeners can as well. And I try to make it as valuable 30 minutes as possible for anyone who takes the time to listen in. So if anyone is interested, that's how you can find me and hope to connect.
And I'm going to encourage my audience to look you up and follow you and get involved with you and pick your brain as much as they can, because I think you've got a lot of great passions and information that people really, really need to hear today. And it's been an honor having you on the show, and I'd love to have you back sometime and we can do this again and just have a good time, have a good conversation.
Art, the honor was mine. I'm happy to come back anytime. You know where to find me. I'm not going very far for the foreseeable future. So it was truly a pleasure.
With that being said, I'm going to close the show out, and all the information about Adam will be in the show notes, and you can hopefully not wait that long to get them. Just go reach out today and try to get a hold of them. You know where you can get a hold of me at expectationtherapy.com, and my email's art@expectationtherapy.com. And with that being said, I'm going to let Heather White take us out of here.
Thanks for listening to the show. Drop us your comments and questions with what you want answered on the show. You can subscribe on iTunes and Binge Network. You can also get more information on the website, expectationtherapy.com.